You ever hear a sound that makes your blood run cold? That sharp, metallic clang of something alive thrashing in a cage. That was the first night I knew something was very, very wrong with my neighbor, our HOA's very own queen of cruelty, Karen. I froze by the sidewalk, one foot still hovering over the curb, when the muffled screeches drifted through the humid night air. Not the sound of cats. Not dogs. No. It was wild. Exotic. I swear I could hear the distinct cry of a macaw. Frantic and trapped. My heart thumped hard against my ribs. What the hell was she doing in there? Karen. Our power-hungry, bleach-blonde homeowners association president. Was notorious for busting people for weeds too long. Mailboxes not aesthetic enough. And God forbid if you dared to park your truck on the street overnight. But smuggling animals. My mind was racing. Images tumbling over each other. Cages stacked on top of one another. Claws rattling against bars. Eyes glowing in the dark. I whispered to myself, almost choking on the words, "This can't be real." But it was. The very next morning, I saw her backing her SUV into the garage at 5 a.m. Sharp. Headlights cutting through the mist. She looked over her shoulder nervously, clutching something against her chest. The garage door slammed shut before I could see more. I stood there on my porch, coffee mug trembling in my hand, the steam rising like smoke from my disbelief. Why would Karen, of all people, be hiding exotic animals? Days passed. The neighborhood grew restless. Children whispered about strange growls echoing at night. One kid swore he saw a tail, striped, long, slip through the crack of Karen's garage door. At first, people laughed it off. But then came the smell. That sour, heavy stench of hay mixed with urine and something musky. Wild. It drifted down the cul-de-sac like a dark secret no one wanted to claim. I couldn't stay silent. Not anymore. So I called the county wildlife office. My voice shook as I explained everything. The sounds. The SUV at dawn. The shadows moving behind her blinds. The officer on the line stayed calm. But I caught the sharp edge in his tone when I mentioned cages. "We'll investigate," he said. And I exhaled. Finally. After holding my breath for what felt like weeks. But Karen wasn't about to roll over. She caught wind of my call. I don't know how. Maybe she had a mole on the homeowners association board. Maybe she just had that sixth sense evil people get. She stormed up to my porch one afternoon, her heels cracking against the pavement like gunshots. Her voice was shrill enough to slice glass. "You're spreading lies about me," she screeched, waving her homeowners association clipboard like a weapon. "I'm the president of this association. Do you have any idea what slander does? You'll regret this." I tried to hold my ground, though my palms were sweating. "Then open your garage and prove me wrong," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. She gasped, clutching her pearls like she'd been mortally wounded. "How dare you? That's trespassing. That's harassment." Her face was crimson, her hair frizzing under the afternoon sun. She stormed off, muttering threats. That night, the noises grew louder. Panicked cries, the scrape of claws, the low rumble of something bigger than a house cat. I pressed my pillow over my ears. But it was useless. Sleep abandoned me. Then came the twist none of us saw coming. One morning, a delivery truck backed up to Karen's garage. The driver hauled out wooden crates, stamped with foreign stickers, marked fragile in bright red. I squinted from behind my curtain, pulse racing. The crates rattled. Violently. Oh God. Oh no. That's when I saw it. A feather, bright turquoise, almost glowing, slipped through a crack in the crate and fluttered to the ground. My knees went weak. That wasn't a pet. That was contraband. By then, the wildlife officers were already building a case. They showed up 3 nights later, under cover of darkness. Plane trucks rolling in silent as shadows. Flashlights cut through the black. The garage door was forced open, and what spilled out made the entire neighborhood gasp in horror. Cages upon cages. Parrots with clipped wings shrieking, their feathers dulled with dust. A lemur, eyes wide and terrified, clinging to the bars. A baby serval pacing restlessly, tail lashing. And in the back, shrouded in tarps, 2 crates larger than refrigerators. When the officers peeled them open, the sound that came out made my spine curl. A guttural roar, primal and furious. Tigers. Actual tigers. Karen stumbled out onto the driveway in her robe, mascara smeared, screeching that they had no right, that this was a witch hunt. Her voice cracked as she pointed at me across the street. She planted this. She hates me. She's framing me. But the officers weren't listening. Their radios crackled. Their gloves tightened around evidence bags. Neighbors gathered, wide-eyed, murmuring like a Greek chorus. Phones recorded every second. Karen, our iron-fisted homeowners association dictator, was dragged into the back of a wildlife unit while her empire of cages clattered behind her. And here's the bitter, twisted irony. The same bylaws she enforced so viciously. They came back to strangle her. Homeowners association rules forbade any unapproved animals, much less a goddamn tiger. The board convened within hours. Her presidency revoked. Her name blacklisted. But it didn't stop there. Weeks later, as news vans camped on our street, reporters dug deeper. Turns out Karen wasn't just hiding animals. She was trafficking them. A smuggling ring, stretched across state lines. Exotic pets funneled through suburban garages. Cash exchanged in secret. The perfect mask. An homeowners association queen hiding behind rules, using power as her shield. The trial was brutal. Footage of crying macaws and bruised lemurs played for the jury. Karen's crocodile tears couldn't drown out the evidence. She tried blaming her husband, her nephew, even the delivery men. But the receipts, they bore her name, her signature, her greed. When the sentence came down, 8 years behind bars, plus federal fines so steep she lost her house. Our neighborhood erupted in cheers. I'll never forget that sound, relief, like chains breaking. And me, I just stood there, watching the for sale sign hammered into her perfect lawn, sighing so deep it felt like my lungs finally unclenched. But the story had one last sting. Months later, I ran into one of the wildlife officers at the grocery store. He leaned close, voice low, almost conspiratorial. You know, he said, those tigers weren't the worst of it. We think she had connections overseas. We're still tracing it. She was bigger than just this neighborhood. My stomach flipped. For a moment, I imagined what might have happened if she hadn't been caught. If those cages had stayed hidden. If those tigers had grown restless in a suburban garage. I shivered, clutching my shopping cart like it was an anchor. She could have destroyed us all. I whispered. The officer nodded, eyes dark. And she almost did. So the next time you hear a strange noise at night, don't brush it off. Don't assume it's just the wind. Sometimes, evil hides in plain sight, under fluorescent garage lights, behind neatly trimmed hedges, under the guise of rules. And sometimes, it takes just one person, one voice trembling but unbroken, to crack it wide open, because Karen thought she could control us, silence us, own us. But in the end, the wild came roaring out of her garage and the only one caged was her. And that was justice. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more stories where karma always finds its way. They showed up in matching blazers like they were running for HOA President of the Year, except they weren't running. They were storming my lawn, yelling about citizens' arrest, and flashing what looked like plastic badges from a Halloween aisle. I laughed until one of them pulled out zip ties and shouted, You're under arrest for violating Federal Code 62A. What even is that? It was 10:30 a.m. I was barefoot, drinking iced coffee, and watching my kids splash around in the backyard pool. It was supposed to be a relaxing Saturday. Birds chirping, hose spraying, that kind of calm suburban hum. Until the Karen sisters showed up like a bad SNL skit, only they were dead serious. "Ma'am," said the tall one, Jessica, the older of the two sisters, always the one with the loudest voice and worst intentions, "we have authority. We've reported you multiple times to the HOA, and this morning, we're taking matters into our own hands." "What for?" I asked, holding my coffee midair, brow raised. "Watering my grass at the wrong angle? Having a mailbox that doesn't scream beige depression?" She gasped like I'd slapped her. "No, for harboring fugitives." Oh wow. At first I thought it was a joke. I even chuckled. "You've got to be kidding, fugitives? Like, real fugitives? Don't play dumb," snapped Rachel, the younger sister, her stiff blonde bob practically vibrating from rage. "We saw strange men at your house last night, suspicious. Military-grade vehicles. You think we don't know what's going on?" She pointed toward the black SUV parked halfway in my driveway. "We followed the vehicle logs. You've been violating local safety codes and the federal surveillance protocol." I couldn't help ITI actually snorted. Both of their faces twitched. Just the tiniest flicker. "That's right." Rachel doubled down. "We're working with them, and you're interfering with an ongoing investigation. So you're coming with us. Now." They weren't joking. Not even a little. Rachel snapped on a pair of dollar store sunglasses. Like that somehow made her more intimidating. While Jessica began circling me like a lioness who watched too many crime dramas. I stood there, stunned, until I heard the familiar sound of water splashing behind me. From the pool, Agent Mendez casually lifted his head above water. "Ma'am, everything all right?" he called out, slicking back his hair. His muscular frame glistened in the sun. Tactical tattoos peaked just above his shoulder. The man looked like a magazine spread until he held up his encrypted comlink and signaled his partner, who was lounging in the patio chair beside my grill. "Wait, what?" Jessica stammered. Who is that?" "Oh, that." I grinned. "That's Agent Mendez. And the guy with the headphones by the hibiscus bush? That's Agent Singh. They're FBI. Real ones." The sisters went dead quiet. You're lying," Jessica whispered, eyes darting toward the pool. "He's in a swimsuit." "Yeah," I said, sipping my coffee with a smug shrug. "He's undercover. You know, like a normal Saturday stakeout in a pool." That's when things started falling apart fast. Jessica pulled out her phone and started dialing someone, mumbling something about backup. Rachel, meanwhile, turned beet red and demanded the agent's show ID, like she was suddenly in charge. Agent Singh didn't move. He just slowly set down his drink, reached into his bag, and flipped open a badge so legit it practically glowed. "Rachel and Jessica Tomlinson," he said in a calm, sharp tone, like slicing a steak with a butter knife. "You are currently impersonating law enforcement, attempting an unlawful detainment, and obstructing a federal surveillance operation. Stay where you are." "Oh my God," I whispered, my mouth dropping. "This is real." "You've been under observation for weeks," Singh added. "Not you, my anthem." That's when my legs got weak. "Wait, what? You're telling me you've been watching them this whole time?" I asked, nearly dropping my mug. Agent Mendez nodded, pulling himself out of the water like a Bond villain on vacation. Let's just say, these two sisters weren't just HOA busybodies. They've been running a private surveillance ring, selling false reports, extorting neighbors, creating fake legal documents to intimidate the elderly. A gasp escaped me before I could stop it. Jessica shrieked, "That's a lie! We're community protectors. We local heroes." "Ma'am," Singh said, unamused, "you installed a drone inside someone's chimney." "Allegedly," Rachel barked. Another agent walked up from the front yard. Backup had arrived. Real agents, real badges, real handcuffs. There was no escape now. Jessica looked pale, like her brain had shut down mid-error code. The Karen sisters were done. I stood there in stunned silence as they were read their rights right on my front lawn. Birds still chirping. Kids still giggling from the pool. The universe was calm until the screaming began. "I demand a lawyer," Rachel cried. Jessica, red-faced and deflated, tried blaming me. She lured us. She's the criminal. She bribed those men. Agent Mendes sighed, shaking his head. "Ma'am, we have hours of surveillance footage audio, too. You planned this arrest with your pretend cop boyfriend over text. You even rehearsed it." "Oh my God," I mumbled. "Is this real life?" Just then, my elderly neighbor, Mrs. Granger, wandered out in her robe, holding her tiny dog. She said, peering through her bifocals. "So that's why my rose bush had a listening device in it." Jessica and Rachel were stuffed into the back of separate black SUVs. Still shouting, still denying, still grasping for control they no longer had. But it was over. The whole block was watching. Phones out, faces pressed against windows. It was the most satisfying end to their years of terrorizing the neighborhood. And you know what the twist was? The military-grade vehicle they'd reported? That black SUV in my driveway? That was my brother's. He's in the FBI. He'd been using my House Me Paola as a casual, private surveillance post while they gathered evidence on the Karen sisters. Yep, the same Karen sisters who tried to fake arrest me were being watched by the real feds the whole time, from 10 feet away, in swim trunks. Tell me that isn't karma doing a cannonball. Weeks passed, and the fallout was glorious. The HOA, which had long turned a blind eye to the Karen sisters' schemes, was immediately placed under investigation. Turns out, several board members were either too afraid to speak up or were in on it. Once the FBI laid everything out, mails, hidden camera footage, even voice recordings from secret HOA meetings, the house of cards collapsed faster than a cheap lawn chair. Jessica and Rachel were hit with multiple felony charges, including impersonating federal agents, unlawful surveillance, and attempted kidnapping. Yeah, kidnapping. That's what their little citizens arrest stunt amounted to in court. And the cherry on top. Half the neighborhood joined a class action lawsuit against them for emotional distress and property violations. I didn't even have to testify. The evidence was overwhelming. I'd catch bits of gossip during walks, neighbors chatting about how Rachel used to threaten fines for too many wind chimes, or how Jessica once followed a teenage boy home because his haircut looked gang-related. Wild stuff. Stuff we used to whisper about. Now it was front-page news in the local paper. Suburban schemers. HOA sisters face federal charges. The headline felt like justice. The best part? The new HOA president, Miguel Mel, from across the street sent out a public apology and removed every bogus fine issued over the past 2 years. She even threw a little freedom from Karen barbecue. The whole block came. As for me, I finally got a peaceful weekend by the pool. No shouting, no threats, just the sound of sprinklers, ice clinking in glasses, and the occasional chuckle when someone brings up Karen Gate. I still catch myself smiling when I think about it. The sisters thought they could control everyone, intimidate people with fake power and dollar store badges, and in the end, they got hauled off by real agents hiding in plain sight. In my pool, wearing Ray-Bans. Now that's what I call a plot twist. So next time someone waves a fake badge in your face or tries to boss you around like they own the cul-de-sac, take a deep breath and make sure the real feds aren't already watching. Because karma wears mirrored sunglasses and swims laps before breakfast. And if you want more wild stories like this one, real drama, real justice, real lawsuit endings, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. The Homeowners Association wanted us gone. 3 sentences. That's all it took for them to show their hand. They tried to kick my family off our own lakefront farm, thinking we were just some regular folks who'd roll over and leave quietly. What they didn't know. Every single one of us is a federal agent on active duty. Can you imagine the irony? They came for us with fake rules, lies, and threats, and ended up pulling the pin on their own grenade. I'll never forget the moment Karen the self-appointed queen of the homeowners association, stood at the end of my driveway, clipboard in hand, lips pinched tighter than a knot in barbed wire. Her voice screeched through the air like nails dragging down a chalkboard. "You and your family are in violation of community guidelines," she barked. "Your farm, your livestock, your presence is incompatible with the neighborhood vision. You'll be expelled." Expelled. From land my grandfather bought 50 years ago. From a farm that fed half the town during the floods. I just stood there, leaning against the fence post, staring at her like she'd lost her last marble. "You're kidding me, right?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Karen doesn't kid. Behind me, my brother Sam, Special Agent Sam, though Karen had no clue, let out a low chuckle, shaking his head. My sister Jess, badge tucked neatly in her jacket pocket, exhaled sharply. We'd been trained to handle hostile situations. But this was a different battlefield. It was petty power mixed with arrogance and ignorance. The kind that blinds people until they walk off a cliff. Karen wasn't alone. Of course. She never traveled without her little flock of homeowners association board members trailing like ducklings. They nodded and whispered, clutching their binders like holy scripture. One even dared to snap photos of our barn with her phone, as if documenting evidence for some trial. "You have 30 days to vacate," Karen sneered, handing me a paper. It wasn't even official. Just homeowners association letterhead she probably printed from her home office. My jaw clenched. I could hear the low hum of cicadas in the trees, the restless neigh of our horse in the paddock, the soft slap of lake water against the dock. Life around us was calm, steady, until her voice cut through it all. My father stepped forward then. He's a federal marshal, though he prefers folks just call him Dad. His weathered face didn't move much, but his eyes, sharp steel gray, pierced right through Karen. "This farm isn't going anywhere," he said softly, almost kindly. "Neither are we." Karen laughed. Actually laughed. "We'll see about that. The homeowners association has more authority than you think." Authority. Over us. I almost burst out laughing too. Instead, I let the silence stretch. Heavy. Awkward. You ever notice how silence can be louder than shouting? Karen's smirk faltered. She didn't like it. Not one bit. Days passed, and the harassment escalated. Letters stuffed in our mailbox. Threats of fines stacking up. Anonymous calls reporting suspicious activity on our property. Activity that turned out to be me repairing fences or just jogging by the lake. We knew the game. They were trying to bury us under nonsense, to wear us down until we gave in. But here's the twist they never saw coming. We don't break. We've been trained to hold steady under pressure most people couldn't even imagine. And when Karen thought she could bully us into packing up, she crossed a line she didn't even know existed. One evening, just as the sun dipped behind the trees, painting the lake in streaks of fire and gold, we caught Karen trespassing. She was in our barn, clipboard flashlight in hand, snapping photos of our equipment. Jess caught her red-handed, and her voice cracked like thunder. "Step away from that tractor, Karen." Karen froze. Her eyes darted like a cornered animal's. I'm conducting an inspection," she stammered. "Inspection." Jess stepped closer, badge flashing just enough for me to see, though Karen missed it. "On private property. Without a warrant. Do you even hear yourself?" Karen muttered something about HOA rights and tried to scuttle away, but Dad blocked her path. The air thickened. You could almost taste the tension, metallic and sharp, like biting your tongue. Karen's arrogance faltered into fear for a heartbeat, but only for a heartbeat. Then she puffed up again, shouting that she'd call the sheriff and have us arrested. That was the moment, the pivot, the second she threatened law enforcement. She set off a chain reaction that would end everything she thought she controlled. 2 nights later, flashing lights painted the gravel driveway red and blue. The sheriff's deputies pulled up, responding to a call from the Homeowners Association about illegal farming practices and unlawful occupancy. Illegal farming. Unlawful occupancy. I swear, I almost choked laughing. But Karen stood there with her arms crossed, chin up, convinced she'd finally won. What she didn't know was that the sheriff himself was an old friend of Dad's. They'd worked joint ops together. When the deputies stepped onto the porch and Karen began spewing her venom, the sheriff turned to us and asked one simple question. "You want us to handle this officially?" Dad gave a single nod. That's when everything flipped. One by one, my family revealed who we really were. Badges came out like a deck of cards, flashing in the porch light. Marshal, FBI, Homeland Security, ATF. Even my mom, sweet as pie and always baking cookies for the neighbors, laid hers on the table. Karen's face drained of color. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. This is a trick," she stuttered. But it wasn't. Not even close. The sheriff smirked. "Ma'am, you just attempted to file false claims against active federal agents. That's obstruction. That's harassment. Well, you're in deep trouble." The deputies didn't arrest her on the spot, but they might as well have. Her empire of intimidation crumbled right there under the weight of truth. Neighbors peeked out from their porches, whispers spreading like wildfire. Karen, the queen bee, reduced to a trembling shadow. But here's the kicker. It didn't end there. Oh no. Karen doubled down. She started forging documents, claiming we'd violated environmental codes, zoning laws, even wildlife protections. She sent drones over our property, took photos, blasted us online, calling us criminals squatting on sacred land. Each move was more desperate, more unhinged. We collected every piece of it. Every forged letter, every drone video, every slanderous post. Evidence piled higher than hay bales in our barn. And when the time was right, we delivered it. Directly to the U. Attorney's office. The case built itself. Fraud, harassment, defamation, trespassing. The list went on. Karen thought she was untouchable because she had a clipboard and a boardroom of sycophants. But when federal prosecutors came knocking, reality hit her like a freight train. I'll never forget the sight of her at the Homeowners Association clubhouse. Wrists bound in shiny steel, being led away as her loyal ducklings gawked in horror. The same neighbors who once cowered before her now whispered relief. Even applause. But the bitter twist. The farm survived. Yes, but the Homeowners Association didn't. Investigations revealed corruption, embezzlement, and illegal kickbacks woven through their books like rot in old wood. The entire organization collapsed. Karen didn't just lose her power. She lost everything. Her home, her reputation, her freedom, and us. We stayed. Stronger, prouder, and oddly amused. Because in the end, Karen's biggest mistake wasn't underestimating our farm. It was underestimating us. Sometimes I sit by the lake at night, listening to the water lap gently against the dock, thinking about how quickly arrogance can unravel a person. All she had to do was leave us alone. All she had to do was let life roll on, neighbor to neighbor. Instead, she pulled the trigger on her own downfall. So, when folks ask me what happened with the Homeowners Association, I just shake my head and smile. They tried to expel us, I say. But turns out, we were the wrong family to mess with. And that, my friends, is how karma works. Fast, sharp, and merciless when you least expect it. Thanks for sticking through this wild ride with me. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and join the channel for more unbelievable stories like this. I wish I was making this up. One minute I was reaching for a can of soup. The next I am staring at a stranger's handprint on my shoulder. And the worst part? She was already yelling about fraud before I could even breathe. "Excuse me, you're parked in a disabled spot and you don't look disabled," she barked, her voice slicing through the quiet supermarket like a rusty blade. Heads turned. My ears rang. And then Crasher elbow swept into the pyramid of canned tomatoes, sending them clanging and rolling across the tile like tiny metal grenades. I took one step back. "Ma'am, No, don't you ma'am me. This is fraud. You people fake those tags all the time. I've seen it." She spat, her lips curling in disgust. "You probably forged that paperwork just so you can take the good spots while real disabled people suffer." My stomach twisted. My disabled placard isn't just real, it's the result of months in physical therapy after a drunk driver shattered my hip. And the audacity of her? She didn't know a damn thing about me. I glanced at the security camera overhead. Good. Let it record everything. "Lady, I've had 3 surgeries just to walk without a cane," I said, my voice low but trembling. "You don't get to decide who looks disabled." Her eyes narrowed. "Don't play victim with me. I'm on the HOA board, I know how to spot liars." She stepped closer, her perfume stabbing my nose like overripe flowers in summer heat. Then she raised her phone, shoving it in my face. "I'm filming this for evidence. I'm gonna make sure the police see how you're scamming the system." My jaw clenched. Evidence? Oh, she was handing me evidence on a silver platter. The store manager, a wiry man in his 50s with a nervous twitch, jogged over. "Ma'am, please." Karen spun toward him, her voice suddenly syrupy. "This woman is committing disability fraud. That's a lawsuit waiting to happen. If you let her shop here, you're liable too." I could feel the burn of stares from every aisle. My cheeks flushed not with shame, but with that electric mix of anger and adrenaline that makes your fingers tingle. I almost laughed, right there in her face, because I knew something she didn't. 2 weeks earlier, a friend in the HOA had shown me an internal email and actual printed copy where this very Karen was under investigation for forged HOA reimbursement checks. The board was quietly sweeping it under the rug to avoid public embarrassment, but the whispers were already growing. And now, she was accusing me of fraud? Oh, the universe was serving this on a hot plate. "Manager," I said, keeping my voice steady, "can you call store security? I'm feeling threatened." Karen scoffed so loud it echoed. "Threatened? What are you gonna dokri on me?" The metallic clatter of rolling cans still filled the air as 2 uniformed security officers emerged from the back. One, a tall woman with sharp eyes, walked straight toward us. "What's going on here?" Karen jumped in before I could open my mouth. "This woman's using a forged disabled tag. I demand you check it." The officer tilted her head. "Ma'am, we're not the DMV. And you just knocked over a whole display. That was an accident," Karen shrilled. "Don't you see? She's a fraud." I finally let out a sharp laugh, just one. Because I could see the cracks forming in her confidence. "Security, you should know," I said, raising my phone. "I've recorded everything she said to me, and I happen to have proof she's being investigated for forged checks by her own HOA." The officer's brows lifted. "Is that true?" Karen's face went pale, then blotchy red. "That's irrelevant," she snapped a little too fast. "No," the officer said slowly. "That's very relevant, because it means you're harassing someone while you're under investigation yourself. That's enough for trespassing." Karen's mouth opened, closed, then opened again like a fish gasping in a dry bucket. The manager stepped in, rubbing his temples. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the store." "You can't." But she didn't get to finish. The tall officer took her elbow knot gently and started walking her toward the doors. "Yes, we can. And if you come back before we say so, you'll be charged with criminal trespass." Karen struggled, her heels squeaking against the tile. "This isn't over. I'll sue you all." I almost wanted to clap. Almost. Instead, I just sighed and picked up the can I dropped in the chaos. As the doors whooshed shut behind her, the store seemed to exhale. Conversations resumed. Carts rolled. Somewhere a baby giggled. But I wasn't done. Because here's the twist: her HOA fraud investigation? It wasn't just rumors anymore. Later that night, I forwarded the video of her supermarket meltdown, along with my proof of her forged checks, to the county attorney's office. It was like tossing gasoline on a smoldering fire. Within days, her name was buzzing all over the neighborhood. People were digging up old grievances fines she'd slapped on residents for unauthorized plants, threats she'd made about paint colors. And when the HOA's treasurer finally admitted funds were missing, well, you could almost hear the pitchforks sharpening. I got a call from my friend on the HOA board 3 weeks later. You won't believe the Scarens trying to sue the HOA for defamation. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my coffee. Let me guess, claiming the check forgery was a setup? Bingo, my friend said. Only problem is, the bank has her signature on all 3 checks. She's cooked. Cooked was putting it lightly. By the time the HOA's lawyer was through, not only was Karen's lawsuit tossed out, but she was ordered to repay the stolen funds plus court costs. And the cherry on top, the judge noted her pattern of harassment toward neighbors and members of the public. I thought of that moment in the store, her red face, her shrill voice, the cans hitting the floor, and felt that same electric rush. Only this time it was pure satisfaction. By the end of summer, Karen was a ghost in the neighborhood. Her once perfectly manicured lawn went wild, dandelions scattering like tiny yellow warnings. She stopped showing up at HOA meetings, which was almost funny considering she used to bang the gavel like she was presiding over the Supreme Court. I'd see her car no more smug wave from behind the wheel pull into her driveway late at night, lights snapping off fast, like she didn't want anyone to know she was home. Word was, she'd been spotted at the courthouse 3 separate times, each visit shorter than the last, each one ending with her leaving red-faced and silent. The lawsuit she'd filed against the HOA had imploded spectacularly. She tried to claim the forged checks were accidental duplicates of legitimate expenses, but the forensic handwriting expert the HOA's lawyer hired tore that story apart in about 5 minutes. The judge, in open court, called her explanation a clear and deliberate act of fraud. I wish I could say I felt bad for her. But then I'd remember the sharp sting of her hand on my shoulder in that store, the humiliation in front of strangers, the way she spit the word fraud at me like she owned the truth. No, I didn't feel bad. Not one bit. What did surprise me was how quickly people turned on her. The same neighbors who used to cower when she sent HOA violation letters were suddenly sharing her mugshot from the county website. Someone even printed it out and taped it to the bulletin board by the community pool, right under the calendar for potlucks and yoga classes. It stayed there for 2 whole weeks before anyone took it down. And me? I went back to the same supermarket a month later. The same store manager spotted me in the soup aisle and gave me a small nod. "She's banned for life," he said quietly. Video of that day came in handy. I just smiled. Glad to hear it. There's a particular satisfaction in knowing the person who tried to publicly shame you ended up publicly shamed themselves. Only in her case, it was earned. And that's the real sting of karma, isn't it? You never know when the same energy you throw at someone is going to come boomeranging right back, faster and harder than you can handle. Karen had set out to humiliate me, to label me a fraud, to build her own little case in the court of public opinion. Instead, she walked straight into her own courtroom nightmare, one she couldn't slap her way out of, no matter how loud she got. If you think that's justice served with a side of poetic irony, you'll love the other stories we've got, so hit that subscribe button on my YouTube channel, because the next lawsuit is even wilder.